Kashmir files that had been forgotten. The wounds of the Nadimarg massacre, in which 24 Kashmiri Hindus were brutally murdered, are still fresh. 19 years later, the survivors are still seeking justice. Today on the Newshour, we will reveal the untold story of Nadimarg murder fallout. Ladies and gentlemen, while the Jammu and Kashmir High Court has reopened the case, Times Now has now accessed the 2009 order copy of the Principal Sessions Judge of the Shopian Court that highlights some damning details. The order copy reveals that the main accused in the case, a Pakistani terrorist who was to be produced for trial before the court, wasn't brought before the judge multiple times because apparently there was a shortage of cops. Yes, that is the excuse they used, the Jammu and Kashmir government of the time. Yes, you heard it right. This happened not just once, but 68 times between 2003 and 2009. It's absolutely shocking, and this is how the victims of Nadimarg were betrayed over and over again. The case had been dragging on for years on end, and in 2011 it was closed for lack of evidence before being reopened just a few days ago. Listen in to the survivors as to how they were betrayed.
रात के 3 बजे थे और हम जो गाय जहाँ पे रखते वहाँ पे मम्मी के साथ मैं और मेरा भाई ऐसे दोनों को पकड़ा हुआ था, मुंह पे हाथ रख के ताकि कुछ बोले ना, और ऐसे ही 4-5 बजे तक वहाँ रुका गया था। बुरा लगता है और गुस्सा भी आता है कि ऐसा हुआ था और किसी ने कुछ किया नहीं। जैसे उन्होंने बताया कि मेरे पापा थे जो पुलिस वहाँ चौकी गए थे, लेकिन उनको बजाय पुलिस फोर्स भेजने के उनको भी जेल में बंद कर दिया कि आप मत जाओ, हम भी नहीं जा रहे।
और मेरे मामा का लड़का वो उसी वक्त पुलिस चौकी में चला गया। पुलिस उनको बताया हमें मार रहे हैं, उधर उग्रवादी आ गए, हमें मार रहे हैं। पुलिस वालों ने उनको बिठा के रखा, बोला को इस वक्त हम नहीं जाएंगे, कुछ भी हो हम सवेरे जाएंगे।
The victims have not only been betrayed, but cops also have been betrayed by the system. Mufti Saeed, who was the chief minister when the massacre happened, promised to police protection to the victim's kin, but very little translated on the ground. Ghulam Nabi Azad was appointed as the chief minister in 2005, and during that time, that is between 2003 and 2008, the main terrorist was produced only 24 out of the 73 times. Omar Abdullah was the chief minister in 2009, and under his watch, 19 times accused number 1 was not produced by the cops. And that is the Kashmir story you never heard.
You're watching the News Hour at 9, debate number 2 on Times Now, Super Prime Time.
To debate that tonight on the show, GVL Narsimha Rao, Member of Parliament and National Spokesperson of the BJP, Dr. Anand Ranganathan, Ashok Pandit, Director, Majid Haidri, political analyst, and Tahseen Poonawalla, political analyst, join me on the show. Ashok Pandit to you. Ashok Pandit still to join us. GVL Narsimha Rao. Does this seem absolutely familiar way the PDP and the National Conference have behaved in the past? Because 68 times the terrorist is not produced in court, and this is between governments of the PDP, the Congress and the National Conference. Is this how they were committed to justice for Kashmiri Hindus?
Navika, on a very auspicious day when the whole nation is celebrating Ganesh Chaturthi, I think to debate this is really giving me a lot of pain. 2003, 24 Hindu Kashmiri Pandits were killed at gunpoint, and the case in 2011, eventually the High Court did not allow a trial of the case because the state government was not represented in the court. I think it appears to be a completely concocted and a completely conspired effort, not just by the terrorists, by the likes of LET, but the state governments and the political parties seem to be co-conspirators in the entire case. How could the state government ignore giving basic human rights and basic justice to the people of Kashmir, Jammu and Kashmir. They were bona fide citizens of Jammu and Kashmir, and the manner in which the state governments in 2003, the Mufti Sayyid government, and later the PDP and the Congress governments dealt with this case is shocking. You talk about human rights in every other case that's so convenient for you, but the manner in which human rights have been violated in Jammu and Kashmir, where massacre, genocide of Kashmir, innocent Kashmiri Pandits have not been given a fair trial, it's so shocking. I think I'm happy at least ultimately these cases are coming back to give justice and to give them a closure. The state government, the current administration has certainly asked the court to reopen these cases, not just this case, even even JKLF Chief Yasin Malik's involvement in killing of Indian Army soldiers, and even the abduction of Mufti Sayyid's daughter. There are many other cases that have been reopened. I sincerely hope there will be a closure for these cases, and Kashmiri Pandits at last can feel that in independent India they have received a semblance of justice.
I want to ask Tahseen Poonawalla. Tahseen Poonawalla, Congress, National Conference, PDP, three governments between 2003 and 2009 and 11 when this case was closed. Not one of them carries the guilt, just lip service of standing with the Kashmiri Hindus, but not one admission of how they behaved and how cases after cases were closed because they chose not to present the evidence. Even a Pakistani terrorist not being presented in court because there is a shortage of cops, for God's sake, Tahseen Poonawalla, is that even an excuse that somebody will buy?
Absolutely not. And I saw your interview with Dr. Farooq Abdullah Sahab, where you rightly raised his questions, and he was quite upset and he walked away. And as a journalist, I respect your right to ask every and tough questions, and you must. So there are two things that I want to make. I share the Honorable Member of Parliament's concern, and of course, you know, on such an auspicious day, it is sad that we're discussing this. And in our own country, our own fellow citizens, our Kashmiri Pandits, continue to be refugees even after 8 years of the Modi-Shah government. But that's not the debate for today. Ghulam Nabi Azad, who was Chief Minister then, and PDP, who was Chief Minister then, while the BJP is aligned with both of them, or at least right now with Ghulam Nabi and then with PDP, the BJP must promise us today it won't align. It must promise us justice. And when Ms. Mehbooba Mufti's sister was kidnapped, it was Rajiv Gandhi who said do not release terrorists, but the BJP was in government and released terrorists. So the BJP must also atone for its sin and now promise justice to this country and settle our Pandit fellow citizens back in Jammu and Kashmir. Nothing short of that will do. Anyone else, including the then Chief Minister, should be prosecuted. I stand by them. Let them prosecute Mr. Ghulam Nabi Azad rather than the Prime Minister crying for him.
Okay.
I agree. I stand by them.
How convenient. 52 years, Ghulam Nabi Azad was with them. At that time, they didn't want to answer. They didn't want to answer these questions, and today it's so easy for them to say Ghulam Nabi Azad ab BJP ka ho gaya, ab unse sawal pooch lo, hame to pata nahi. Dr. Anand Ranganathan?
Yes, Navika, please give me a minute, and I hope I won't be interrupted most of all by my good friend Tahseen, because I want to rebut him, and it's very important. Navika, I'll tell you what the real tragedy is. The tragedy is that witnesses or observers like us pick out tragedies from what has been a rolling genocide. And Mr. Pandit would know it more than anyone else. What happened in Kashmir is a rolling genocide, and to pick out one massacre, one incident, betrays our ignorance of what that genocide really was. And here I want to put Tahseen on the dock, because right on your show all those months ago, I hope I won't be interrupted by my good friend Tahseen, he called Kashmir Files a jhooty propaganda film. This was by far, I'm sorry Tahseen, the most disgusting of your affronts. Please allow me.
I never did. Anand, you're factually wrong.
Allow Anand Ranganathan to make his point, and if there is something you object to, you can come in later. Yes, Anand Ranganathan.
Yes, he called, Navika, I was on the show, and I really did not want Tahseen to be interrupting me. He called Kashmir Files a propaganda film. And let me tell him, does he know about the Nadimarg massacre that the film truthfully depicted, where Zia Mustafa, he lined up 23 unsuspecting Kashmiri Hindus and shot them point blank? And as he was escaping, he heard a baby cry, Tahseen, "Ye karwaun chupe," said his friend. and the baby became the 24th victim. Is this jhoot, Tahseen? Do you know about Girja Tiku, who was raped and cleaved into two by a mechanical saw while she was alive? Is this jhoot? Do you know about BK Ganju, who hid inside a rice barrel when jihadis came looking for him, and his Muslim neighbor informed on him? Ganju was shot dead. Rice laced with his blood was fed to his wife. Is this jhoot? The slogans raised from mosque on 19 Jan, Ralif, Salif, Galif, deaths to Kafirs, Pandit, leave your women behind, Nizam-e-Mustafa. Is this all jhoot? Answer, Tahseen, you owe us an answer.
No, but today, Tahseen Poonawalla, 1 minute, let me get in Mr. Ashok Pandit. No, he is the only Kashmiri Pandit, and I will give him Tahseen, wait after Mr. Pandit, not before him.
There's a lot of hate done against you because these allegations. I just take 10 seconds with apologies to with Ashok Pandit. Just 10 seconds, Dr. Ranganathan. At no point have I opposed Kashmir files. I am on social media and on TV saying the movie should not be boycotted. And even if you
called it a propaganda film, and while Dr. Anand Ranganathan and my research team is looking for your tweet, I want to get in Ashok Pandit. Ashok Pandit, they could not produce terrorists in court because there were very few cops in Jammu and Kashmir. That was the reason that these terrorists could not be examined. That was the reason evidence could not be examined. And that was the reason that Nadimarg massacre, where 24 people were killed, had to be closed. Had to be closed in 2011. I want to ask you, is there blood on the hands of all of these parties that have ruled Kashmir? The PDP, the National Conference, as well as the Indian National Congress.
Navika, we have lived with this apathy, with this attitude, with this behavioral pattern of all the political parties in Kashmir since the last 33 years of our genocide and exodus. Till now, government has not officially released a document or passed in the parliament that we were the victims of genocide. We have not been called as the displaced Kashmiri Pandits, displaced community in the country. What do we expect? All these things which are coming out now, that the files have come out, and we all know about it. We all know there was a total apathy, and the apathy continued till all these people ruled. All these things are coming out now, where there is a system where there is at least a thought that yes, this happened and things have to be told to the public and they have to be punished. Not a single FIR was filed against all those terrorists who were responsible for my genocide. I want to shift this subject a bit. Yesterday, see, the apathy continues to all levels. I'm talking about my industry. Politics ko thoda bagal mein rakhte hue. Yesterday was one of the biggest Filmfare Awards in Mumbai. And you know, Navika, Vivek Agnihotri, the producer and the director of Kashmir Files, was not invited because he made Kashmir Files, which exposed these very politicians, all these apologists who said that this is not a film at all, and they condemned this film. The way they were exposed, they couldn't take this shock. We are facing the same things. We kept on crying. We kept on screaming from last 30 to 30 years. It is now that the things are coming out. Not a single door was open for us. Not a single police station was open for us. Not a single politician was open for us. There was a lot of celebration that Ghulam Nabi Azad has left Congress. So everybody is celebrating it. All the opposition political parties are celebrating it. For me, Ghulam Nabi Azad, Mufti Muhammad Sayyid, Farooq Abdullah and his entire family, all these families are responsible for all the massacres of Kashmiri Pandits in Kashmir. Whether it's Nadimarg, whether it is Nadimarg, or all those massacres. Very few people who have survived have come out with their stories. And now things are coming in forefront. The apathy still continues. The apathy of Kashmiri Pandits still continues. Even now, there are thousands of Kashmiri Pandits on the streets in Jammu, in Delhi, in Kashmir, asking for their transfers to save their lives from Kashmir. How long are these politicians politicians going to play with my tears, with my emotions, with my genocide, with my ethnic cleansing, Navika? How long are they going to garner votes on us? How long are they going to penalize us for being Kashmiri Pandits, for being Indians, for raising a flag in Kashmir? How long? How long? There'll be umpty number of stories. Vivek has entire material with him. The day he starts putting all those search material forth, all the interviews, there will be a total, they all will be exposed. Navika, I don't know how to react because we have faced this entire.
I understand Ashok Pandit. What can I say as a country?
Navika, can you clarify?
One minute. Yes, you have sent me you have wished Vivek Agnihotri all the best. You have sent me a tweet that you sent. But Majid Haidri, the anger, the hurt is raw and alive in Ashok Pandit's voice even today. But I want to ask you, not presenting evidence at that time, not presenting the accused at that time because there was a paucity of the cops in Jammu and Kashmir police. I mean, is that the lowest of the lies that could have been put before the court? And is this not something that was actually a live cover-up that was happening?
वेल यस नाविका साहिबा, इस तरीके से मुझे कत्ल किया है उसने, इस तरीके से मुझे कत्ल किया है उसने, अब भी दुनिया ये समझती है कि मैं जिंदा हूं. I totally agree with Dr. Ranganathan on the show tonight, exclusively tonight only, that he said, why should we single out one massacre? We are a saga of massacre. Before Nadimarg in March 2003, we had Gujarat massacre in 2002. And then we have survivors from all the massacres.
Let's stick to Kashmir. In 2002, whatever happened, victims, people who were the perpetrators face the law. It is in Jammu and Kashmir that they didn't. Anand Ranganathan.
Yes, no, Navika, I must say, I stand to be correct. No. Now, if Tahseen wished Vivek Agnihotri well, I owe him an apology. I didn't mean to suggest that you didn't wish Vivek Agnihotri well. Tahseen, please, you're a very good friend, and I would be the last person saying this. I had in mind, Tahseen, 1 second. It is Mr. Majid Haidri who has been consistently saying that Kashmir Files is a propaganda. You can see Ashok Pandit is here on the panel. And let Mr. Majid Haidri dispute me. I'll apologize if Mr. Majid Haidri says it is not the case.
You commercialize the pain of Kashmiri Pandits. It was simple commercialization of the true pain of Kashmiri Pandits, and I don't endorse that movie. That movie is half-truth. That movie is half-truth. It is not the complete reality. One-sided half.
Commercialization. Well, when Parzania happened, how come you didn't have that to say about that film? Suddenly, Kashmir Files becomes the commercialization of somebody's distress and somebody's pain.
Yes,
GVL Narsimha Rao, hypocrisy and double standards. They will not talk about. They will not talk about the evidence that was not presented. They will not talk about the fact that terrorists were not produced in court because there was a paucity of cops, but they will talk about commercialization of the pain of the Kashmiri Hindus. Is that the only explanation they have to give tonight?
Navika, I think a lot of people are feeling very uncomfortable that the worst massacres and the worst violence that was heaped upon, that was wreaked upon Kashmiri Pandits is coming now into the public glare. For several years, I think the massacre and the genocide of Kashmiri Pandits remained only confined to some section of the society. It was only Kashmiri Pandits who were talking about the injustice meted out to them. But the public at large did not know. Kashmiri Files, in a way, has completely changed that and brought into the public consciousness the kind of the horrific violence that was heaped upon them. And all these the pseudo-secular elements in the society all those who have appeased even terrorists for the sake of their, at the altar of their political expediency, they now find the truth the very inconvenient. I think they would rather every time anything that happened in Gujarat, there were several hundreds of Hindus who were killed in Gujarat violence. And and all the riots in Gujarat have all been under the glare of the courts. Everyone was examined. Several perpetrators have been punished. But in Kashmir it was genocide.
Why is the story of the Kashmiri Pandits, the Kashmiri Hindus, always muddied with what happened elsewhere in the country? Do Kashmiri Pandits and Kashmiri Hindus not deserve at least some amount of penance from the rest of us? The question is, did we fail them? Yes, we did. It's absolutely true when you see the details of what transpired then. Why then are excuses being made? It's a question that we need to answer if we have any conscience left within us, especially in the political parties that ruled Kashmir in that time, the PDP, the Congress and the National Conference. Wake up your conscience if it still exists. Thank you very much to my panelists for joining me on the News Hour tonight.